Hello, and this is Pod 4, and today we're going to be discussing The Ones Who Stay and Fight by N.K. Jemisin. And I'm Darren.
And I'm Declan.
Okay, let's get started. I thought the main argument to The Ones Who Stay and Fight was that effective social change was possible in a society. And like the people of Umhalat, they still have the same differences that we have in our society. They have differences in race, differences in class, they have in economy, but they, instead of using those differences to uh, just like um, to divide them, they use them to just they don't even really think about the differences. They just use them as like a unification.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, it's the kind of thing. It's like they don't see race. Like everyone is. I'm assuming everyone is human. We are the same, despite how we look. We are the same race. Everyone should be equal. And I mean, yeah, I think yeah, that's a very good view on how yes, like change can kind of take place. I think it's also kind of in relation to like revolution and stuff like that, because like specifically like in this kind of society there isn't really any kind of like that like revolution kind of thing, because the people who would be are actually taken in by the society, as we know from like when the child has the parent killed. They take the child in and help them instead of like leaving them out there to like fight back or whatever. They bring them in and help them uh, become a person and part of that society.
Yeah, exactly. Instead of rejecting the child for having a different view, having a flawed view of humanity, they rehabilitate it and rehabilitate her and try to teach her how to live in a more equal manner. And like like in Umhalat, they've conquered the issues of environmental preservation, sustainable farming, and they've also like used the differences within them to build their society up. And I have a quote. It says, "Oh, some of this will be familiar to you in concept, at least, like terms for gender that mean neither he nor she, and the condemnation of words meant to slur or denigrate. And yet you will puzzle over the Umhalashians' choice to retain descriptive terms for themselves, like kinky-haired or fat or deaf. But these are just words, friend, don't you see? Without the attached contempt, these words have no more meaning than if horses could proudly introduce themselves as Palomino or miniature or hairy-footed." And I think that quote is really important because it describes to the reader that and explains to them like they retain these differences and they use them because like they have differences between them, but they're not used to, as I said, to divide themselves and condemn. There's no contempt attached.
Yeah. And I think a big part of having like that kind of society is in part to also with their like the technology they have. Like there's this quote, like beneath a skyscraper that floats a few meters off the ground. Oh, it is perfectly safe. Umalot has controlled gravity for generations now. And I mean, just that alone, like you said, even you said before, like they conquered issues of like farming, environmental preservation, and stuff like that. That when you get to that like level of technology, it just, and I think in order to even get to that point, you do have to have like a certain stage where you embrace everyone uh, and become enlightened, or enlightened in a way.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Um, and it's like compared to the Omalaz story, the ones who walk away from Omalaz, I that whole story I thought was based off the idea that society has to be uh, there has to be people above each other, and there has to be society's based on the suffering of some people for the benefit of others. And that was what that author I think was trying to get at. But this NK Gems, and I think what she's trying to explain is that like the effect of social change is possible, and it's just instead of keeping people like that down, like the child in the basement, and having people like the child in the basement in society, um, it's helpful to rehabilitate them and rehabilitate those who believe in the suffering of those people. And so a society like Halat is possible.
And how it conveys that initial reactions to genre conventions. I think actually, have you seen the have you ever watched Black Mirror on Netflix?
I've seen the first episode.
You've seen, okay, so I think like these both of these stories like kind of remind me of like that kind of not necessarily like this that's like specific show, but something like the Twilight Zone, like something that looks perfect from the outside, but is like very flawed in a very large way, despite the fact that it looks well perfect, like a utopia. And I wouldn't necessarily consider both of these like I don't know to be horror, since it's in most parts it's quite uplifting with the descriptions. It's just kind of both societies are kind of cursed in their own way.
Yeah, I thought it wasn't so much horror as just kind of a warning for the future and like a dystopian type of story, because it definitely is dystopian because there was an apocalypse and there was a rebuilding of society. But I think it's deeper than that. It's like a warning for us in the time we're living in now to learn these lessons, or we're going to end up going the way they did, and we might not rebuild.
Yeah, and definitely, I think another big thing was not contempt, like ignorance, I would say, or just like like in Umhalat, if they like if they went too far away and they saw like the old world or the old world, like what had been destroyed, and they learned everything. Well, obviously, like they were killed, but like ignorance like even in the Omela story, like people knew about the child, they just did nothing, which is I mean I think it's a pretty big theme today. And like people will see stuff, and like I mean our environment is being destroyed, and while some people yes are very advocative of like preservation and stuff like that, there are many people who like bury their head in the sand and just were like don't really realize what's happening and how bad of a disaster it could happen from our actions.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the child in the basement is. I know this is a different story, but it is it's N.K. Jemisin's story is a response to the Omalaw's story, and in our own lives, we like. I mean, that's where our clothes come from. It's from children in third world countries making them, and we just have to live with that knowledge. But I mean, we don't do anything because it's a lot easier to just. I mean, I do it. I mean, everybody does it. It's just easier to um, exist and ignore it. And I think that's what N.K. Jemisin is getting at, is that it's like that kind of change, that collective accepting of and trying to work toward. I think a quote was um, something like effective social change, or pragmatic change. That it's the Omaha story is not actually realistic because it is possible to work towards that. Um,
Yep.
yeah.
I do want to do the close reading bit.
Um. Uh, sure. Well, it says we have to look at a convention in the text that shows that the genre we were using. And I have another quote. It said, "The information gleaners know that what they do is wrong. They know it is what destroyed the old cities, and indeed they are horrified at what they hear through the speakers and see on the screens." Um, and that's just explaining. That's real, just quick explaining how the only, like you were saying before, the people in Umhalat, they are so innocent in their way that they just don't even perceive that people are different than others. It's they don't understand that as a bad thing. And I think that quote relates to the dystopian genre because that's um, this is set in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely dystopian.
Um, okay, I can't actually read it because I can't minimize. Could you read the quote?
Oh, the paragraph. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you.
All right. So the paragraph was, does this work for you at last, friend? Does the possibility of harsh enforcement add enough realism? Are you better able to accept this post-colonial utopia now that you see its bloody teeth? Ah, but they did not choose this battle. The people of Umhalat today, their ancestors did. When they spun lies and ignored conscience in order to profit from others' pain, their greed became a philosophy, a religion, a series of nations, all built on blood. Umalat has chosen to be better, but sometimes only by blood sacrifice may true evil be kept at bay.
Thanks. And a word choice that was really interesting to me in that was the bloody teeth sentence, um, which was explaining how Halat, it's not a completely perfect city. They have to kill people in order to preserve the innocence and the equality in their city. And that the narrator, they kind of narrator sounded sarcastic in a way, like in order for you to actually understand that this society is real, you have to relate it to your own society, which is based off the like violence is a big part of it. It sounded kind of snarky, which I thought was interesting that she decided to write that.
Yeah, and I think even like the first part, like, does this work for you at last, friend? Is that kind of like yeah, like a kind of like a snarky tone? Like, does the fact that there is like something finally like wrong, or like you've seen what's finally wrong with this place, can you now accept that it actually exists? And even the next thing, like, does the possibility of harsh enforcement, like killing the parent, add enough realism? Like, does that make it real enough for you to believe? Like, do you now see it as something that could possibly be, or is it still like some perfect utopia that is so far in the future we couldn't imagine?
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a they're like the narrator, it sounded kind of like she was like, oh yeah, you got us, you saw the bad that we actually have to do, and you can finally relate it to your society. Now you believe me, finally you got me. And that it sounded snarky, and uh I thought that was an interesting choice. And another choice I thought was interesting was how the narrator describes greed as a religion, and it showed how like in our society, like our society is based off of greed. That's what um I guess capitalism is based off ever the collective, and that's how it works together. And how in Umhalat they have a different their society is based off like equality and the preservation of community for individuals to prosper, and instead of attaining things.
Yeah, and then I did like that she in the paragraph she says that like the people of Umhelat in the story that we in the current period that we read now, like they didn't necessarily choose to be born or in a society where they are so innocent and kept free that everything that they have is just built on what their ancestors did and how they don't have to ignore their conscience, what their ancestors and who before them did in order to, as you said, like make almost a religion out of like greed and have and just being able to have such innocence in a community like that.
Yeah, definitely. That the people that the caretakers are killing the ones who get tainted. That is preserving the innocence of the other citizens. And her word choice of in another sentence, she uses sacrifice to instead of just straight up like I'm killing these people, we're actually sacrificing them for the innocence of others. So it's not just murder. It's a noble deed because you're sacrificing the one person for the gift of innocence for everybody else.
Yep, only a blood sacrifice May true evil be kept at bay.
Yeah.
Which is pretty pretty cryptic.
Yeah. um. Okay. Well, I think we hit all the requirements. Okay, and we're at 15 minutes. So
Okay,
um,
perfect.
awesome. So thank you for listening to the Pod 4 podcast about the ones who stay and fight. Goodbye.
Thank you. Have a nice night.
Have a nice night.